Welcome to the Scale Up Valley podcast, where we bring the best founders, CEOs, and investors to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is a very special one. Her name is Ida Teen, the co-founder of Clue, mother of the term FemTech, and also founder and CEO of the think tank called FemTech Assembly. Ida, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's great. I still remember the great work that you did with Clue in my regular visits to Berlin. Was almost the beginning of the ecosystem. It makes me feel a dinosaur now, but
I know.
It's kind of crazy to think it was kind of 12 years ago, right, that you started Clue. So.
Yeah.
And it was really an icon in the FemTech space. It was the beginning of the ecosystem, and especially also of us talking about women health and the FemTech terminology and so on. But yeah, let us know more about yourself and about how it all started, a bit about the history, the term FemTech and so on, for people to have a bit more context about yourself.
Well, we were definitely part of sort of a new wave that started around that time. We were not the only one. I should say that was a little bit, what I recognized. There are other people that felt like they were neighbors to what we were building. So other people who were also building technology to address the women have that are specific because of the technology we have. And I was looking around and I was thinking, what if we had a term that could unite us, that could make people recognize that this is a really big, interesting thing happening in technology. And there weren't that many, but there was enough that I was like, something is happening. And also in the sort of cultural realm, something was happening. 16 was the year, or maybe it was 15, where the New York Times said that it was the year of the period, or the year the period went public. That's how they said it. So there was some opening in culture where suddenly we could start talking about parts of women's lives that had before been very invisible. Yeah, we were part of something that happened, and I think
movement.
What the board did was sort of just that grain where something could crystallize around that time was very ripe with already, and yeah. Since then more and more have sort of come into that space.
We will get back to the pod in 1 minute. Let me just tell you that I'm glad to announce that this podcast is sponsored by the web agency WebTech. WebTech are specialists on getting customers to companies. They are booking 250 meetings a month to their own sales team. And their business strategy is to teach other companies what they do for themselves. I'm very excited to announce that I've agreed with Pontus, the CEO of WebTech, a special advantage to our listeners. Our community have now access to a pre-designed suggestion on how your website could be improved and/or free trials for both SEO and digital marketing. Oh, and by the way, we are working with them too, and I'm impressed by the results. You can do the same. You just need to go to trywebtech.com/Mike, trywebtech.com/Mike, and tech is without the H, just TEC, and tell them you are a listener of the show. Now, back to the pod. Yeah, and I was talking about 12 years, but now looking back to LinkedIn, it's 17 years, so another 5 months off of it. So Jan of 2008, that's when you started, and yes, that's the economic crisis that also helped to fuel all this excitement about venture capital and startups and creating new companies and all that wave in Europe as well, with London being the number 1 hub, Berlin being the number 2, and then Paris getting to number 3. Those were the 3 top hubs in Europe at the time. And yeah.
Yes.
And today it's not very different.
It has definitely changed, because I was living in Copenhagen and this was not part of the cities where tech was happening as much yet. And that was actually one of the reasons why I moved to Berlin, to be closer to sort of a tech ecosystem.
Yeah.
But when I had the idea for Clue in 2008, it wasn't so much the sense of like, oh, tech is happening, I want to be part of this thing. It was like, why has nobody come up with a type of birth control that actually is great?
Right.
And I had a motorcycle touring company at that time with my dad, so I was riding motorcycles all around the world, and I had spent 2 years also riding my own motorcycle in the deserts of America. And so I did notice the economic kind of climate changing, because we were doing high-end tours and people had less willingness to spend a lot of money on going on a wild, crazy, holidays for a few weeks. So I thought I wanted to do something else. And then the female health space was something that just like, the idea would not leave my head. I was like, I have to do this.
Yes.
So that's how it started.
Yeah. And tell us more about how it's been, what is Clue about for the ones who are not super aware of Clue, and how did it evolve, and what were the main milestones that you achieved with Clue, and what were your lessons learned along the way? Yeah.
How many hours do we have, Mike?
Yeah,
no, but I mean,
but maybe it's just free key takeaway.
Right, that's right. I mean, I wanted actually to build a piece of hardware. That was my first idea. I wanted to measure hormones in saliva so that people would have this at-home diagnostic tool that could tell them really accurately, like with scientific precision, where they were in their cycle, because you can actually only get pregnant a few days per cycle. So I thought, what if we could just know and have this information on your phone, so you could take out your phone and it would say, either today you cannot get pregnant. Cool, don't have to worry about it, or today use a condom. It's like, that would be pretty cool, especially for the hundreds of millions of people who have phones but no access to birth control. So we started out trying to do that. And then my co-founder, he said, we should also build a peer tracking app, because then we can start kind of, being in this field, understand our users. And that was really smart, because after some years, we understood that we were this two-headed monster building hardware and software. And at that time, people were like, are you going to speak to our tech people, or are you going to speak to our life science people? And we're like, no, it's a combination that's smart. But that was like too weird. So we ditched the hardware. And then over the years, we understood that by collecting data on the female cycle, we could do so many things for people, one of them being birth control. And we actually got FDA clearance as the world's first 100% data-driven type of birth control. It's not in the market. That's a whole long story. But, I somehow felt that I achieved my own goal of creating a new type of birth control. So that was definitely a highlight. And it was a highlight that we were able to build a product in a segment that had been super underserved, which is helping women understand their reproductive cycle, and seeing that is, it was, and it is, and it's growing to be just a massive category in health. And by collecting this data, we've, it's like mind-blowing. I mean, we have done so many science projects with first-class research institutions, because people say, wow, there is this data set that we've never had before. Now we can start, looking at what's the correlation between female cycle and pollution, or, what are people actually experiencing, or, just so much where you're like, wow, we didn't know this before. But so that has been a highlight, the science work we've done. And then in terms of sort of building a startup, we've been very fortunate that we managed to raise a lot of capital. I mean, everything is relative in terms of numbers, sizes, but for FemTech, it has been a fair amount, even though I think we were always underfunded. We could always have deployed more capital, but that's what we got to play with.
And then you get to a moment that you decide to not keep as CEO and move more into the share position. How has been always been that evolution of leading the company over 8 years, and then 3 years as a share, and then staying as a co-founder? Not sure if you are a shareholder still of the company. Probably yes. Kind of almost stepping
still
away.
Have little crumbles left in the cap table,
Okay.
most, but it was a time where I could, so as a CEO, I think you have a new job every day. Like you are learning with the business, and as the business grows, it changes what your job is. And I felt I had a new job every day, and I had loved it. I felt extremely privileged, lucky, and fortunate that I got to be in that position. And then when I was looking ahead, Clue was maturing as a company. We had gone through the FDA clearance. We were now working in a quality, kind of control system. We were maturing, and the economy has shifted again. So where we had been very focused on growth in users, we were now like, okay, let's make some money. So when I was looking ahead, I was like, wow, the CEO is going to have to be good at a lot of things that I'm not that good at, and more crucially, that I'm not really curious about learning.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, a lot of Excel sheets. No. And I was also a bit tired. And there had also been a change on the management team. The COO had left. So it was this moment where, am I hiring a new COO, which is like a long-term commitment of some sort, right? Because you try to find this perfect match with the CEO. And
Of course.
the investors will also like, well, Ida, it's also a moment where we could get like professional CEO. And I was like, what? but I think they were very right. And then everything happened in a way. So I actually got to choose the new CEOs because I hired two. And so that was a really nice feeling of like handing over, the farm to the next generation, to people that I really trusted. And, I felt so rich because I felt like, wow, when I started, there was nothing. There literally was a post-it note on my wall, my small 2-bedroom wall. There was nothing. And then I could now hand off this whole company, all these users we were serving, the brand, the science, like all of it. It just actually felt like a big gift.
That's
from
amazing.
Me to give. Yeah.
And
then I was on the board, and that was also interesting. But at some point, what happened after I stopped being CEO, it was like my focus changed from this hyper focus, looking at one company, to then being curious about, well, what's happening in this sector? And actually, how does this sector sit in the wider tech sector? And actually, what is this tech sector doing on our planet? It was like, whoops. And I actually love thinking about the big picture stuff. I'm not a great operator. Like I will mess up my calendar always. It's a standing joke how bad I am at it. It's like so then I decided to also step off the board to then actually kind of in a way be free to care about the whole industry.
Yeah. And this was this year, right? February of 24. So it's a very recent decision. But at the same time, you still stay in touch and keep following.
Yes. Yes, I do. And I do it for several reasons. First of all, I care deeply about the mission still that Clue has. I think it's a deeply meaningful product that Clue is building. I care a lot about that being in the world in the best way it can be to serve people. Secondly, I still care a lot about the people. So now actually there's been another change of management, and the new CEO, Rhiannon, she was the former CPO, and she's amazing. I mean, Chloe has been doing so well the last years, and she's a big part of that success together with the former CEOs. And so I just I would love to support her any way I can. And thirdly, when I go out in the world, people still think that I'm Clue. I say, no,
that's true.
I'm not operationally involved. I'm not even on the board. It's like, but so I cannot escape that. So I also want to make sure that I represent Clue the best way I can. Being up to date on what's happening on the product and what it would be weird if I had no idea what's happening at Clue when people expect me to know.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, that's amazing. And today, given what you started to care more about, not only about Clue, but about what is the movement that Clue is part, and how is the sector doing, and what is the impact of the sector to the planet and to the world. You created a think tank very recently,
Yes,
November 24, which is
yes,
called FemTech Assembly. Do you want to share more about it and what is the purpose? What are you
yes.
building there?
First, I should get the record straight. I wanted to apply for a grant, and they asked about the company details, and there was no organization yet. So I started a LinkedIn page for FemTech Assembly as the bare minimum of some existence on this planet, which resulted in an automated update, which told people about my new position as CEO in an organization that doesn't exist yet. So that has
Okay.
been kind of awkward, but I am working
Yeah.
on the paperwork with a lawyer. It will exist shortly, but so just wanted to say that it is indeed very fresh.
Yeah.
In my mind, there's a really simple connection between investing into women's health and that being a huge business opportunity. It will drive economy and it will drive societal economies as well. It's very expensive for societies when women don't get adequate health care and when they're not thriving. And we also know that when women are participating fully in society, we get a lot of good outcomes. Turns out we take better care of the environment, we're less likely to go into war, and many other great things. So I'm like, why is this not common knowledge? It's so simple, guys. Invest into women's health, we will be rich and happy, and the planet will thrive. What's not to like about it?
Right.
Right? But so
Yeah.
my thinking is, wow, that could be an investment thesis for angels, funds, public institutions, like anybody really. So that's really the purpose of this think tank. It's just to try to inspire people to see that there are no good reasons to not invest into women's health. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And then
And are you no, go ahead,
no, I
please.
just want to say I'm not an expert on think tanks. Actually, I don't really know much about them, but the little bit I've been able to pick up, I have noticed that sometimes they feel very kind of they might do a report once a year and they go speak to some people in Brussels. But I would love the think tank to be much more like a social movement, where it's like, hey folks, if you also care about this and you want to channel some of your good energy that you have to give into this, let's do something together. Because I meet a lot of women, especially also men, who say, I would love to get into FemTech, or I'd love to do something, but I don't know quite how. And I thought, well, what if there was a place where it was easy to publish your ideas, or, I don't know, do an event or be part of helping do that report or whatever it is. So I hope it will be like a more digital and communicative and sort of real-time living place than a
Right.
kind of boring think tank.
Yeah. But are you still in the moment of building it, or do you already have some ideas about will you have members, will you have events, initiatives, will you have a tech platform that supports all those initiatives? Or are you
I
still
mean,
envisioning at this stage and
yes,
letting your imagination go, right? And
yes,
flow?
I am still, I'm open for all good ideas. That's where I am right now, because I think in the end, this institution has to serve the people who are building FemTech. And it has to also serve the people who are not yet investing into FemTech, but who could. So I'm all ears on finding out where are the kind of systemic blocks that people hit up against. My assumption is that the biggest one is lack of awareness. So what form it will take, I don't really know yet, but I think probably one of the first thing I want to do is to publish the book that I wrote over the last 3 years about FemTech that I couldn't get published in
Wow.
America because I don't have enough social media followers and other lame reasons. So I think that will be my first product, maybe. And maybe it will not be a
Uh-huh.
book, maybe it'll be 3 short books, or maybe it'll be a bunch of articles on Substack or something else, to be seen. But I want to use that
Got it.
material. And then I want to that'll be my last idea, because I could just fill the rest of the podcast with this. But I would love to have some really smart people from different sectors help me build the argument so that it is undisputable. like actually, have the data, like, look, it says it here. This is why it's a good idea. So I love that.
Science and
I have
facts.
ideas who I'd like to speak to.
Got it. And now, of course, you make us all curious. I'm sure that the ones who are listening while commuting or while relaxing, they are thinking, what is the book about?
The book is about my journey building Clue, and it's about my thoughts about FemTech and female health. And it's also a lot about venture capital that I have a lot of critical thoughts about. And then and there's also a little bit like tips and tricks, like how to build a board, thoughts on leadership. So it's a little bit of mixed bag. It might be part of the problem for publishing this book, but it's really like this, everything I've learned and done and think the last 10 years building Clue and being a female founder and a FemTech founder on this planet.
That's amazing. Wow, that's a bit what this podcast is about as well. That's perfect. And going there, I'm curious also about your thoughts on VC. But let's start with something that I really think it's quite innovative that I think I've never approached it here in the podcast after 300 plus episodes, which is how do you manage fear in organizations and in yourself as you build up a company, right? So I think that's a very important stuff that founders need to go through, and leaders, especially going through the emotional roller coaster, where sometimes fear can make you not know how to handle it sometimes, or panic, or isolate, or in other words, it can also make you potentially adopt behaviors that you are not proud of. Anyway, I think that's a good point.
I think you said something that is really fundamental to like establish, is that there is fear, a lot of fear when you build a startup, because you are constantly racing full speed against the wall, and you hope you will somehow kind of magically build a ramp that will get you over that wall. So it's very counterintuitive, like this sense of like, I'm going full steam, even though I know this might not end well.
Right.
Because I might run out of money, or, these crucial people on my team might leave, or I might have a media disaster, or some other thing that would feel fatal.
Yes.
So we acknowledge there is fear, even though we don't celebrate people who show fear very much. So people are pretty good at hiding it. But the thing is, there is fear in you as a founder. There is fear on the management team. They might be a little bit fearful about what the hell you're doing, what their teams are doing, their own performance. And by the way, are we running out of money? So they have a lot of fear. And the team has fear too, because they might also sense, how are things going? And why are people leaving? And why have we hired for somebody yet? And on and on and on. There are many things to be fearful about too when you're building things on the team. And your investors, they're pretty fearful too, because they have a lot of skin in the game, and they have their own repetition, and maybe they're new in a fund, and they want to make sure they're like lots of fear. So as a leader, you are like in this whirlwind of like all these unsaid, unspoken, sometimes quite unconscious, strong things moving in the room. And okay. So first, like, recognize how you find your own sort of, I got this, we're going to be fine. Or here is the situation. We might not actually be fine, but we're still choosing to do this, And then I think it's a lot about how do you create spaces as a leader where people can actually somehow ventilate fears. How do you help them process something that happened? How do you help them sort of land something that might feel sort of really alive in them? I mean, it can be things like, I remember after the first time Trump got elected, people were crying in the office. It felt disastrous, and we would sort of And we could see our users were tracking sad on that day in huge numbers. Like, so then it's like, okay, we tried to like, okay,
It's
how do
happening
we,
again.
yeah, right? And it's like, so we're like, let's have 3 people go to the Women's March in Washington, and then suddenly you feel like, okay, we can do something about this. We can do something with this. But we had an employee who committed suicide. It was horrible, He had only been with us for a few weeks. We had we felt we had done everything we could. Like it was this really sad and shocking experience. But we could rest in like, we did what we could, and it wasn't enough,
Wow.
but we did what we could. So there are these moments, and I think as a leader, like how do you bring people in to have a safe space where they can actually kind of sit in a circle and just hear each other and know that they're not the only ones who are freaked out about this. And then you can say very concretely, like, here's a plan, or these are the open question. You make it part of the agenda to take the fear seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I think part of the fear management is also putting things in perspective. Like, okay, worst case scenarios, we would have to like cut 50% of the employee group, or worst case, we would have to raise money at a really shitty valuation. Well, okay, but you know what? Users are not going to care about that. It's only your problem, etc. You like,
Right.
or worst case, our competitors is taking us over and we're going to die. Well, at least somebody's building something kind of halfway as good. But still, the world is being
Positive
served.
mindset.
It's just like,
I love it.
sometimes
I like that one.
I see founders and they hold on to this dream of building this company to the point where it is literally killing them, or very close to it, and they burn out and everything is crumbling, where I'm like, hold on, like, you lost perspective, dude. It's often a dude, can also be a girl, but it's just like, so that's like the extreme end of it. Like, also know when to stop if it's actually too much. But then also very practically, like, we would have Body Tuesdays where people could spend an hour and a half doing sport, in paid work hours. Because we recognize as founders, like, we are not getting enough movement and it's part of our mental well-being. So we hired a private trainer. And then we're like, why am I standing here alone with this private trainer doing my squats in the park? Like, we could be more people in this park doing squats with this trainer.
Good idea.
So then we said, hey, the whole team, come and join us. And then people could do whatever they wanted with that involved moving their bodies for an hour. And this is also part of this sort of, how do you build for health? We did many other things in the organization to really, in a way, truly care for people. And that's also part of the fear management, that you are resourced, that you feel healthy, that you're not super stressed out, so that when something comes that's challenging, you have enough capacity, physically, mentally, emotionally, to, like, yes, this is tough, but we got this.
Very good techniques on how to deal with fear. And you were saying something very interesting, is it's not only the founder. Of course, the founder is in the epicenter of that fear, right? I think everyone agrees with that. In the middle of the board, of the fear of the board, in the middle of your own fear, which is already significant enough to even need to deal with the fears of others, and don't allow those fears to be your fears in a certain way, and be able to separate yourself and then deal with the fear of your own team. And that's why it's so important to have sometimes someone outside of the organization, a peer, a sounding board, that you can really talk about, that is not involved in the relationships, right? Because it's very difficult to talk about those fears with the team that will be impacted by your fear, and with the board
Yes.
that might be feel even more fear, because you are with fear and you are sharing them to them that you are.
But I want to say something to that, because I think it's really smart to have a therapist, somebody who can help you on a deep level understand even like why you're actually afraid, like what is triggering these things. But then also I think another really good remedy is actually transparency. And yes, there is a balance, and there are things where you don't want to burden your team too much, and there might be private issues that you have to, like, there can be reasons why you can't be fully transparent. But I would say you can be really transparent.
Really? Yeah.
Much more than you think. And you know what? It's like, guys, here are all the cards. They're open on the table. And then also actually be like, what do you think we should do? You know, maybe that's a management team where you really spend time to get the kind of collective intelligence brought in. And then it might take a little longer, but then once you have a decision, everybody knows, why are we doing this? What were all the other options we didn't choose? And it just creates a completely different sense of safety for you as a leader. You're like, we are in this together. We made this decision together. I'm a big proponent for collective decision making. And for sure, like lots of collective data gathering. You know, then it might be different groups of people that process that data. And in the end, it is your decision. But really, in my experience, for all practical purposes, in the end, it's actually the management team who make decisions.
Yeah.
And that will, and then also push a lot of decisions down to the team.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
And that's a good point, right? It's sometimes what in this kind of environments, what teams have a lot of fear about, it's about what they don't know, and that the founder is isolating, is not, they feel that they are not sharing everything. At least they know, as you said, almost the worst case scenario, what is going on, and they can be part of dealing with that fear and trying to create a plan that makes the fear go away. Or at least reduce the intensity of the fear to a point that is manageable and not blocking your progress. Right?
And then when you have to make tough decisions, people saw them coming, they know why, and then they also have confidence that there is a life after, you know?
Exactly. That's a very good point. And now that we're talking about fear, let's talk about an emotion, which is how can you use anger in hiring. I'm really curious about this one. I must say that I'm asking the questions, but I'm really, really curious about also learning from your perspective.
There are different things to it. So first of all, when you hire somebody, you want to try and get a feel of like, who are these as people, right? Yes, we look at their CV, we trust they can do whatever technical thing they're hired to do. But in the end, when things don't go well on teams, it's not because they didn't know how to code or write a piece of, marketing copy. It's because there was something in the relational space that it just became too difficult.
Right.
And so one of the really powerful ways, in my experience, to figure out a little bit deeper, like, who is this person across the table, or sitting next to me in this interview situation, if that's what you're doing, is to ask them about what makes them angry. And usually people will not have had this question before. So you will see people thinking on their feet. And I think it's a really interesting question because in my mind, it tells a lot about their sort of level of self-reflection, in a way their maturity level, but it also tells something about, do they get angry about social injustice? Or do they get angry when a coworker is late for a meeting? Like what level of things are we oriented around? And then on the sort of, on my own, like in my own work, so in myself, I think anger is, it can definitely be a big driver. This sense of like, no, this is not right. I'm going to have to do something about this. This sense of like, I want this, I don't want this. No, yes, I need this. The world needs to fit me. This sort of, there is a good energy in this sort of, and we are very often trained, especially women, to never be like, I want this. I don't want this. No, that joke was not funny. It's like, and there are good reasons because women get very punished mostly for showing their anger and their assertion. And there's also destructive anger where you just like bitching and against anything and kind of unfair and reactive, and it just becomes like toxic and not cool. And that can happen both in men and women for sure. Where it's just like this is, I think the thing is, it's the kind of anger where you can't interface. You can't, there's no bridge. It's not like, oh, we can be together in this and do something. It's just like a go away. But the kind of anger I'm curious about is when it's like, don't you also want to do this? Hell yeah, like let's do this. Or right, you feel that too? Like what you know? And I think women have many good reasons to be really freaking angry. There is just so much going on where you're like, this can't be true. And it should not be true. Men do too, for sure. And we can talk a lot about kind of men's liberation and women's liberation. I think both is urgently needed. But I think it's particularly interesting to explore this anger a little bit in women because we really are trained to never show it, not use it. And what happens when it's really suppressed is that we get sad. People get depressed. It's not healthy to not say, this is my place on the planet and this is what I need. So.
Love it. I think this last part, you should all repeat what you just said. It's really deep emotional management and understanding that, suppression of emotions creates also a lot of disease, an autoimmune condition. And I think part of that autoimmune condition is also related with me suppressing emotions as well. So it touched me. What you said, that when you don't express your anger, you always let it go inside of you. It gets into sadness and depression, and it's not being, you are not expressing it and manifesting it, releasing it. So, and at a certain point, it needs to go out.
It does. And when I this is a really big brush, and this will not be true for everybody, but if really big brush, I think a lot of women are deeply angry, and I think a lot of men are deeply sad. That's because I think this, women often don't have enough space to create the reality that they need so that it fits them. And men often, I think, don't get the intimacy that they need to have their soul be safe and happy. Like there is something about some very basic patterns, but I'm sure other people have researched and know much more about this. But this is my laywoman observation about the planet.
There's a very good book of Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, right? That's a nice one to at least understand a bit more. Or maybe you don't like much about the book.
I haven't read it. I will read it, but I think what I do like is the idea that you can build a bridge over to other people. And that's why I'm doing this LinkedIn series for men on what it feels like to be having a woman's body. Because over the years, I've seen that many men, they really want to know, what's going on for you women with all this bleeding and breast and birth and pregnancy and all this stuff. What is the thing? Hormones. Gosh, hormones too. And I'm like, how will men actually ever know? A lot of women don't actually know. I mean, they have experiences, but they might not have a lot of awareness around what were these experiences. So I think if we just even on a very basic level try to explain, this is what it feels like to have breasts. I will explain it to you in a way that is truly actually inviting, because that's another part of the anger question. Because very often when women, they will say, you should know about periods. You should realize that this is reality for all women on this planet for 40 years of their lives. How can you not know this? They don't say these exact words, but that's the energy it comes with. And I think that will just make men go go away with your thing, So I think this idea that you could invite people into this world that they don't know is really important.
Yeah, I love that part a lot of educating. I think that's what I like about the book, is that you can even study it together and start recognizing the patterns of each other and trying how to better communicate and better understand each other. And the first thing is really accepting that we don't speak the same language, and that's okay, and that's great. that's awesome, right? So let me know more about Mandarin, and let me know more about Danish, and yeah, tell me more. How does it work? And then probably we will be able to be fluent on both languages. It's normal that after reading the book, you will go back to normal patterns and you will only speak your own language. But that's why I think those are the kind of books that we need to read on a regular basis to remind ourselves, because if not, we go back to the normal, to the normal patterns, right? So that's interesting. Okay, and something that time is flying. It's incredible when we are having fun and having a good conversation. We are already at 40. So I was curious to get to know more. Also being a founder of a VC-backed company for 18 years now. What are your thoughts about venture capital? You said you have some bold opinions about it. I'm really curious.
Yeah. Well, I also wrote an 8-post series on radical ideas to change venture capital on LinkedIn. Because the thing is, fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with the principle of I invest into you, I take a risk, I get part of the return if it works out. That's all good. The problem in my mind is that there is a power imbalance, which is actually a lie, because of course investors need founders and founders need investors. It should be an equal relationship, but it's not. There is somehow built this idea that the ones with the money have the power. And the problem is that this power difference is being fully exploited. And I use that word really consciously because it does feel like an exploitation in my mind. Essentially, as a founder, you bring your life energy. That's what you bring. You bring your life energy. What investors bring is money. But somewhere in that equation, they also bring power. The money comes with power. And this is power that is not earned. There is no good reason for that power. Because the founder who brings their life energy, the passion, their time, their lifetime, it's our time, it's our lives we spend. We actually probably, are best positioned to understand where this business is going, why does it exist, what its potential, etc. Doesn't mean we can't be coached and all of these good things, but there is a sense like at some point, somebody will have more power because they brought the money. It's just fundamentally wrong in my mind. And I think so that's like a really fundamental piece. Then there's a piece about what do we call success? What do we value? What do we actually give monetary value? Right now, we only give monetary value to making money. We will measure a company by how much money it makes. But in my mind, our planet is way past the time where we can afford ourselves to only care about money. We need to care about, are we building a healthy planet? Full stop. It has to be part of the success criteria. This company, are they being part of building a healthy planet? And if they are, we value it. It becomes a valuable company. But my experience with venture capital has been that whatever value we build, which could be honoring people's data privacy, doing educational content that was really scientifically valid, doing science work, building a trusted brand, all these things didn't count for anything. And I think it's wrong. I think it gives a planet where in the end we will have products that are suboptimal because they're being optimized for fast monetary growth. And it means that we might not be sensitive to like gender normative content, for instance, which especially in female health is a big problem. If your ad that talks to hundreds of millions of people potentially tell you how you can make your vagina smell better, which by the way probably should be the vulva, like it's not even correct. But it's like, fuck this. Like, who gets to put up such shitty content that distorts people's ideas about their own body? It sucks.
Right.
And so we have to have people building these products that actually deeply care. Do we value care? Is that something we can put on an Excel sheet and say, yes, here are 100 expressions of why they actually care about their users? Let's value that. So that's the second thing, like fundamentally, we need to redefine how we define success. And then thirdly, I'll make this really short. The whole process around how capital moves through the system, all the way from the LPs to the funds of funds, maybe to the funds, to the partners, to the startups to the team members. It's totally and utterly inefficient, and it's very prone to gender bias, all kind of other biases. It's a social game. It's a lot of bullshit dance. There is no accountability. There is no data on like how does this investor actually walk that talk. They say they want to invest into diverse teams. Well, show me the numbers. How often do they do it? So why don't we have a rating system like on eBay or Airbnb where it's like, okay, this dude has like really bad rating, I'm gonna go somewhere else, or this one seems to be really a cool person to work with. Why is the whole process so unpredictable? It is extremely wasteful. There's so many things we could fix in venture capital and then the tech system where we say, it's all about disrupting things and fixing things. I'm like, how can nobody look at this huge elephant? It's like the spine of the whole system. And as a founder, you spend so much time on it. If you listed all the different projects you've ever done, raising capital is like the big one. And honestly, most of the meetings I had in that project resulted in absolutely nothing. What other projects would you keep doing that where you're just like, I'm fucking wasting my time? It's insane. Yeah. So I have many ideas on how we could fix this, but I think the big question is like, why is the system so stuck? And why do we have this glossy lie that it's cool to raise money? It's not cool to raise money.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really enjoyed especially the founder giving the life energy and the investors giving the money, this power imbalance and this exploitation. I think it's a very courageous and profound topic for us all to reflect about. Thank you for sharing that. And time is crazy flying, and I want to respect your time. But just a final question that we always like to ask our guests, which is, if you'd have the opportunity to have a coffee or a tea with yourself in 2008 and talk to your younger Ida, what did you tell her?
The really honest question is that who you have children with is like a really, really essential decision. I think, yes, that's what I would have said. Think very deeply and carefully about that question.
Thank you for sharing. Ida, thanks so much for making the time. Congrats for the amazing track record, for the continuous dedication to the ecosystem, to the causes, to the purpose. I think that's really inspiring, and we really appreciate all you do for all of us. Thank you.
I have to say this because it's so important to me. I did not build Clue. We built Clue. Without users, there would be no Clue. But the team, my co-founders, it really has been a team effort. So I know I get to get this sort of thank yous, but I really want to pass them on to everybody that's been part and are part of it.
That's amazing. Thank you again, Ida. Thank you for everyone who is listening to us. And we hope it was an inspiring moment for all of you to keep going, to keep persisting on your purpose, because it's not so much important how it ends. What is important is who do you become during the process of building and impacting other people's lives. So talk to you soon and keep scaling. Just stop.